What's up guys, Ryan here at Signature Edits. Today we are editing some deep Moody forest green photos together from a recent shoot that I was lucky enough to do for Shimoda camera bags. So here's what's upcoming. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of deep forest green photos that we went out and shot on this adventure shoot for Shimoda. So they sent me a camera bag, said, Ryan, we want to see what you think. Check this thing out, and holy crap. These camera bags, if you're actually looking for one, I will say, unbelievable. They are built to last. They have literally the perfect amount of room, like one camera and 3 lenses. It's like the perfect amount for an adventure, and they're waterproof. The best part is they're carry-on size. So if you need something to actually take with you when you travel, one of those backpacks, it's the perfect size. It fits everything. It's got pockets galore. Can't say enough good things about this bag. Anyway, so we're gonna jump in and edit some photos together. Whether you're in Lightroom Classic or Lightroom CC, it really doesn't matter. The keys are going to be exactly the same when it comes to how to get those deep, moody greens. All right, so without further ado, let's get into it here. I've got my photos. We're gonna start off with this one right here and just show you how I get the overall look. If you're looking for moody greens, the first thing you need to talk about before you actually start editing is your photo right to begin with? Did you get it right in camera? Because that's gonna make a massive difference to your edit. And so if you're looking at this saying, it's just not working the same, it's because it's not shot with the same lens, with the same light, with the same style, with the same framing. So it's all these little details. And the more I get to know incredibly talented photographers, like my friend here, Amar Habib, who took these photos, the more it's in the details. That's what I'm learning, right? It's you take 100 little details that they get slightly better than you, and the photo winds up being way, way better. So what's going on in this photo that you should know about? Well, first off, it's taken with a 50mm lens. It was taken at f1.2, so a very, very shallow aperture. And it was taken kind of far away, so we've got a nice background blur going on. It was also taken at ISO 800 and a 200th of a second exposure time. So why does this matter? Well, it's because it's really, really dark. So if you were trying to shoot this photo at sunset, like we did, and you're trying to shoot it at f2.8 because that's the lowest your lens goes, you're going to struggle a little bit. You're gonna have to jack up your ISO and you'll have a noisier image. So this was shot with a really fast prime lens. It's shot with a 50mm, so you get a little bit more depth compression. It brings those trees together. Because of that, it also feels like there's more trees in the forest. It's really interesting, and I don't have a side-by-side to show you, but if this was shot with a 35mm or a 16mm, the trees behind me would feel much further away, and it would just feel like there was less of them. And so if you want a really closed-in forest, you want it to feel moodier because you're surrounded by these big, massive trees, a longer lens, 50mm, 85mm, 105, 200mm, it's going to make a massive difference in making that forest kind of compressed around you and bringing it closer to the subject. Hope that makes sense. The other thing is it's shot at sunset. So the photo is taken at a time of day when you have really beautiful, gorgeous light. It's directional, but it's really soft at the same time because we're inside of this forest and light is just reflecting everywhere. But we've also got better color because the color is just more saturated around sunset and sunrise. The other thing that you should know about this photo is it was taken with a circular polarizer on the lens. What's that? It's a little screw-on kind of lens filter that will polarize the light. So it filters out all of the light that is coming from different directions and only lets in light from a more defined direction, and that winds up giving you deeper, richer colors. So if you're wondering why your colors in general in photos aren't looking as popping and vibrant as other people's colors, and you're trying to mess with the saturation, it's looking oversaturated instead of really deep and beautiful, it might be because they're using a circular polarizer in their lens, a polarizing filter, rather than you actually just shooting without, and then your colors are more washed out by default. So those are the things you should keep in mind that's going into this photo. Now let's talk about the actual edit. Now in this shoot, I in general am going to be using the Forest Greens preset inside of the Clean and Classic, and in about one click, I get this nice dark moody feel. But I'm gonna show you what goes into it. And obviously if you want to, you can pause the video and kind of copy these settings. You can see there's not a ton going on. There's a basic tone curve, which is cooling off the highlights, raising the blacks a little bit, just making things a little bit more mellow. Here's without and with that. The HSL panel is doing a lot of magic, so we're really desaturating the blues and the greens and the aquas. And why are we doing that? Well, because moody generally means just more of a kind of subdued color palette. So if you're trying to make things saturated, it's going to be really hard to make them moody at the same time. So when it comes down to getting the right green in your photos, it all is a matter of balancing the HSL, the hue, the saturation, and the luminance, and finding that right combination for all three is necessary if your colors are going to feel right. You might have the right saturation, the right luminance, but if the hue is slightly off, things might just feel kind of messy, or in this case, mustardy. So it's really about finding a nice blend of those three things, and then playing around until you get exactly where you want to be. In this particular shoot, I want to make sure to preserve my yellows because the backpack itself, the main feature of the shoot is yellow, so I need to make sure those colors don't change that dramatically. Let's keep going. So we've got our luminance, saturation, hue. And if you want to grab this preset just as a free sample, I'll make sure to leave a link in the description below. And if you want to grab the whole collection, I'll leave a 50% discount code for a limited time because they are brand new and I'm excited to get them to people. Okay, so not much going on in the color grading zone. In fact, nothing. I like to leave my presets as kind of open as possible. And the sharpness, you're going to see there's a ton of sharpness going on, but it's kind of subtle at the same time. And that's because I've got a lot of masking. So if you hold Option on your keyboard, you hold this masking toggle up, you can actually see that I'm masking out a lot. So this is with everything being sharpened. And as this pulls up, this is only really sharpening the major lines in the photo. So that's my sharpening is all the way up because I feel like it's still subtle enough you're actually not feeling over sharpened. You may disagree, and that's totally fine. You can tweak it to your heart's content. I don't have any profile corrections on here because I do find that in general, Lightroom tends to just go too far, and it also is removing the vignette in the photo. And so when that happens, you can see with our vignette just set to normal with profile custom. Actually, let's set it to auto. It's just getting rid of the moody feel because I actually want that vignette. It kind of helps make the photo a little bit more moody, a little bit more dark, a little bit more, I don't know, vibey. So I normally keep that off. Transform, nothing going on. Effects, we've got a little bit of grain, not too much. And you can do the same thing in Lightroom. Hold down your Alt key, and oftentimes you'll get a little overlay. In this case, it is not working, so we're gonna ignore that. And then calibration, you can see nothing super crazy going on here, but we're desaturating the blues and the reds and raising the green saturation. Let me show you without and with. So it is deepening the saturation of those greens while preserving the other colors, not affecting them too much. So that is the basic preset. Now let me show you how I'd edit it from scratch, and then we'll get into editing the session overall. So first I'm gonna get my exposure right, dial my highlights way the heck back, shadows up a little bit, blacks up, and this stage of the photo editing process isn't creative. I'm just trying to get kind of a basic blend here that looks reasonably natural, and then I'm gonna worry about colors. So I'm gonna make it really, really low on the contrast. I'm gonna take my clarity down a little bit, maybe add a bit of dehaze. And so what I'm looking for is just a nice natural image, and then I'm gonna build on top of that. So I'm gonna go into my tone curve and make 3 points, one in the shadows, one in the midtones, and one in the highlights. And these 3 dots I'm gonna drag up and down, get a nice blend. So I'm gonna drop the shadows just a bit, raise the highlights just a little bit, so we're adding some contrast back, and I'm going to roll off on the whites. So if you actually watch this little pocket of sunshine in the back of the photo, as I'm doing this, it's gonna go from pure white and kind of blown out to just more of like a gray. If I take it way too far, it'll actually make those highlights, the white areas, completely black. So I'm just gonna roll them off a little bit. I'm gonna do the same thing with the black. So if I zoom in here on a black area of the photo and raise that up, you'll see the same kind of thing happening. And if you want to, you can hit the J key on your keyboard, and that'll actually show you when things are clipping. So let's grab, there we go. You can see now this is pure black because it's showing up as blue in the photo. And if I go up here to my whites, that shows up as red because that's now pure white. I'm actually losing information. So I'm just going to dial that back a little bit and go down here and raise the blacks up to a point where I'm no longer clipping. So around there, looks pretty good. Okay, we got a nice clean image. The white balance, it looks okay. We can maybe play with that a little bit, see what happens when we make it a little warmer. Maybe lose the magenta a little bit. Okay, somewhere around there feels fine for now. I'm gonna go to my HSL panel, and here's where most of the magic is happening. It'll let me turn it on. Okay, we're gonna grab our greens, shift them slightly cooler. Aquas, we're gonna shift towards green because if there is blue in the photo, I actually wanna make it more green and it'll just blend with the greens that exist. And the reason that we're gonna desaturate the aquas and the blues so much is because they're just not adding to the photo, right? We've got 3 really main colors going on in this shot. We've got greens, we've got yellows, and we have kind of browns and reds from the tree bark. So really, any other color in this shot is going to distract from those 3 main colors, and we want to place the emphasis on them. Oftentimes, it's kind of like, I don't remember, is it Michelangelo? Someone said, hey, how do you actually paint or sculpt a statue? And he said, well, I take everything that wasn't a lion out of this block of marble, and I'm left with a lion. Well, you do the same thing with your photos. You take everything that is not adding to the photo, and you're left with a better photo. I apologize because I'm pretty sure it wasn't Michelangelo who said that. But so anyways, when I take the blue saturation up, you can see there is some saturation going on in the blue of the jacket. If I take that down, it's just going to kind of blend everything a little bit better and get rid of distractions. Now the greens, we're going to do the same thing. We are going to desaturate them. You're going to see just by doing that by itself, it looks weird. And that's because we don't have the luminance dialed in. So I'm going to take the green saturation down. Now I'm going to bring the luminance down. And you can see instantly that feels a lot better, a lot less unnatural than it did 2 seconds ago. So we've really toned that down. And of course, we are sort of feeling like a little bit lackluster in the photo, but that's easy. We can add contrast back to the photo pretty quick, pretty easy. Let's keep going. So we've got our detail. I'm going to bring the sharpness up because that's just how I roll. Hold the Option key. And I'm basically going to drag it up until only the parts I want sharpened, which is the main lines, are being sharpened. So you can see if I zoom in, it doesn't look over sharpened, but here's before and after. So it's adding a little bit of extra zing, I guess, to the main part of the photo without adding it to everything else, so I like that. Okay, we don't need noise reduction because it's pretty clean, but we could add maybe a little bit just in case. Lens corrections, don't need them. Transform, don't need that. Effects, I'm going to add a little bit of grain, maybe a little bit of vignette. Okay, and then the calibration, we're going to mess around with this by bringing the red saturation down a little bit. You can see it's really not doing too much, so we'll bring it just a bit. The green saturation will bring up, and there's the pop of the greens. So there's where we started, kind of. Here's where we wound up with the greens. They're a much more muted, deeper green. And we can continue to play with that, and then desaturate our blues, play around, see what those do. And I encourage you, just have a play. If you're wondering, if you're inside of Lightroom CC instead of Lightroom Classic, and you're like, this doesn't exist on mine, that's because Lightroom CC doesn't have the calibration panel. It's one of the many reasons I actually kind of prefer Lightroom Classic and would recommend it to my friends. And you're one of them, so I recommend it to you. All right, so far we've gone from here to here, and we're gonna add a little bit more. I'm gonna think dehaze is gonna do it. Just like that. I'm gonna warm up my image a little because now it feels slightly too cold. There we go. So we've gone from here to here. And you can play around. If you want deeper greens, a little bit more saturation in the greens, that's up to you. But you can see, like, the less saturation there is in the image overall, the more moody it's gonna feel. The more I add that back, it doesn't feel as moody, but it does feel a little bit more natural. So it's kind of finding the blend where it's right for you. And the last thing we could do, if we've desaturated the colors and we have some room to go, we could go into our shadows, which is where most of these greens are hanging out. And if you want, you can add whatever shade of green you want. So let's just play around. I'm thinking I like that green right there. I'll just dial in the amount, kind of like that. Drop our shadows down a little. Okay, there you go. And there's a lot of other things that we could keep doing. You know, there's never any end to the amount of combinations of colors and vibes you can go for, but that feels pretty good to me. Now there's a couple things that I would do with this photo. There's nothing to do with making it dark and moody, but it's just gonna really set it apart. And that has to do with using my AI presets, which have nothing super special. I've got a whole episode on YouTube that you can check out on making your own, or you can buy this back. I'll leave a link in the description. But I'm gonna use the Vintage AI Bloom, and Lightroom's gonna find the subject. It's gonna mask it out, and then it's going to make everything else just nice and fuzzy. So if you watch the background of this photo, as I adjust the amount slider here, see how everything else is getting really, really nice and kind of dreamy, a little bit more filmy. That's what the Vintage AI Bloom does. And the Bloom Plus does that, but also lowers the exposure. So we'll hit J, because we're clearly clipping things. But we can dial in exactly how much we want, and by making everything else darker and our subject just popping, everything feels more dark, moody, whatever, but it also really brings your eyes to the center of the image, which is our subject. Because your eye is naturally drawn to the brightest part of the image, so by doing this, our eye is naturally drawn to the subject. So once again, here's before and here's our final after. Or if you want to, you can go up to the Clean and Classic, grab our forest greens, adjust our exposure up, and add our nice Vintage AI Bloom Plus. Dial that in. So there are a couple other things we could actually do with this photo that might be really cool. The first would be to add a nice flare where this sun is naturally coming in. So I would never do this with a photo that doesn't have a natural sun already, but in this case, I can go over to my adjustment brushes. I'm gonna go to my sun flare presets, which are part of Signature Edit's presets. So if you're missing these, that's why. You can just pause the video and copy these effects. Literally, it is just this beautiful yellow color. We've got saturation, temperature, We're taking our tone down. Really, a sun flare is about bringing the contrast down, bringing the clarity down, and then you do a nice blend. So this is obviously ridiculous, but if we blend it back, so it's just being felt more than seen. That's pretty nice. Here's before, and here's after. And then we can take and build on this by making some light rays. So let me show you a cool trick. I'm going to grab the same exact setting. I hit K on my keyboard to make an adjustment brush. I'm going to start at the center of the flare with a small brush. So I've taken my mouse wheel, and by going up and down, you can change the size. I've made it nice and small. Then I'm going to bring my mouse wheel up. I'm going to go to kind of where the light ray might have ended up, make the brush bigger, hold shift, and here's a cool trick. Lightroom will actually make a line that is going directly from where you clicked to where you clicked, and it's changing the size at the same time, so we have a nice light ray going on. I'm going to do the same thing. I clicked once over here, and once over there. Do the same thing again, always starting from kind of the same spot. And that one doesn't look very good. We're going to try again. So we're just going to add a few, and I promise the rest of these edits are not going to take this long. We'll go a little bit faster, but just showing you some options of what you can try. Okay, so let's say we had our light rays that were going like this. We're going to set the setting to Sunflare Epic, which looks ridiculous, but if we tone it down, there we go, somewhere around there. Again, you want to feel it more than you want to see it. So go to where you think it looks cool, then dial it back, and then we're going to click this mask up here. You can actually select Subtract. From there, we can go select Subject. And Lightroom's going to go through there. It's going to make sure that no light rays are actually hitting our subject. If I hit O, you're going to see light rays are going right around our subject, and now we can adjust the amount without it affecting our subject. And if you wanted to, I don't really like that it's hitting these bushes, because I feel like the rays would have kind of hit the bushes and stopped. I'm going to do the same thing, go Subtract, Objects, and then I'm just going to paint on the bushes here. Just like so. And then Lightroom is going to use its AI powers, and it's going to select those bushes out, and now we just have Lightroom adding some nice light rays in behind. So we can dial that back to where it kind of is felt more than seen, somewhere around there, very subtle. But overall, here's our image before, here's our image after. Just some cool options you can use. Okay, with that in mind, let's actually edit the rest of this session using our preset. So whether you just followed my kind of edit and created a preset like that, you can do that by just going up here, go create preset, name it, and there you go. Or whether you buy these presets or grab the free Forest Greens preset, it's up to you. So let's go through, and I'm going to approach this like I were actually editing a shoot. I'm going to keep it pretty quick, pretty simple. So there's a couple things I'm going to do. One, using Shift-M on my keyboard, I'm going to add radial filter. And all I'm doing is just brightening up this area of the image. This is my favorite edit of all of the adjustment brushes you can use. Just bring the contrast down, the highlights and the whites up a bit. It's like a portable spotlight. So if you want your eye drawn to the brightest part of the image, you can just use this. It's a really transparent edit. I think it looks a lot better than a brush because it's just more natural. It's more like the light just happened to land there versus, oh, this one area has just been brushed and it looks too bright. It just blends better. I don't know. Second thing in this particular image, because it was done for this camera bag company and not this jacket company, I'm going to go with my healing brush, go on top of the logo here, and hopefully Lightroom will actually remove it. Not too bad, Lightroom. We'll try again on this one little spot. Just because, again, it's detracting from the real focus of the photo, which is the bag. Okay, that's edited. Let's do another one. Bada bing, bada boom. Let it think for a second. Okay, that looks okay, but the background, very bright. So I'm going to go to my AI Engine Toolkit. And again, you can check the links in the description if you want to grab 50% off this. And what's so nice is I can adjust exactly how much of this deepened background I want. So I'm going to really go for it here. Actually, probably this one was fine, right around there. So here's before, and after. So we've really just placed the focus on our subject. It took 2 seconds versus if I were to manually brush that, it would take forever. Okay, here's one that I really like, background golden hour. Because this shot was already shot during sunset, we're just warming up the background. And then, of course, we should probably add the preset so it doesn't just feel like an unedited photo. Cool, not too bad. Looking pretty darn saturated though. So we can grab our saturation, pull that back, maybe make it a little bit cooler. In this particular case, I'm not loving the background golden hour. No problem, I'll just delete that. Put my white balance back where it was. And I'm gonna use this awesome vintage AI bloom because it's my fave. Adjust the amount, somewhere around there. Bring my saturation back up. Okay, and in this case, my hair is looking kind of weird, so we're gonna just do a little spot removal, but with the opacity kind of down a little bit. Okay, and then if you want it to blend, I'm gonna grab a brush by hitting K on the keyboard. Easiest way to blend hair. Just add some contrast to it. Thickens it up, brings things together. It's not perfect, but neither am I. Okay, and then I'm going to adjust the contrast here, to cropping by hitting R on my keyboard, and then I can adjust it just to make the horizon level. All right, this one we'll start with the exposure. Add our awesome preset. And honestly, that looks amazing. There's a couple things I want to do. One is highlight the stump, the log that I'm on. So I'm going to do the same trick as before. Hit Shift on one end of the stump. I'm actually going to turn my flow up. There we go. One end, and then hold Shift on the other end. Bam, we've got a nice straight line. We could probably make that a little smaller. Also, if you're holding Shift on your keyboard while you have your brush, and then you go up and down on your mouse wheel or your trackpad, it'll make the feather bigger or smaller. So these are the kind of things that really are going to save you a lot of time in the long run when it comes to editing. Okay, so I'm just going to bring my whites and my highlights up. Maybe bring my texture and my dehaze and a little bit of clarity. Just really bring out the texture in that part of the image. I can overdo it a little bit because I am going to apply my fave thing ever, the Vintage AI Bloom. And that's going to kind of soften it anyways, along with the background. Okay, so we've gone from here, we've gone from here to here. Looks pretty good. And if we wanted to, we could maybe brighten up this area of the image slightly. It does look like we're clipping here on these super dark pants. And that's why I really like to do subtle edits when possible. Bring the contrast down a little bit, highlights and whites up. You can see this has gone pretty far, and I've done a really sloppy edit. But if you bang it down so it's more subtle, you're not going to notice it as much. Or, because Lightroom has awesome AI mask tools now, you can go to Subtract and just go select Background. And anything that Lightroom thinks is the background, it'll remove that mask from, so that'll clean up the mask for me. So here's before that mask, and here's after. Cool. All right, I love this shot, except for this stick going through. I would have to go in Photoshop to fix that, so I'm not going to worry about it. For now, we're just going to add our preset, exposure down. Light feels pretty good, but I do want to add a sunflare off to the side. I think because it was sunset and we've got this nice sunny light on the trees here, it'd look awesome. So we're going to go here to Sunflare Epic because, I don't know, I made 4 variations, but for some reason I always just start with the Epic anyways. We can maybe go with the light or the subtle, and maybe they'll be good out of the gate. Nah, I'm feeling epic. It's how I roll. So easiest way to make these things blend a little bit better, if you want to go like slightly more obvious, is just do several of them. So we're going to start like really big, like stupid big. We're going to take that and make it nice and subtle, somewhere around there. I'm going to duplicate this. Forget the invert. To invert your mask, by the way, just hit apostrophe key on your keyboard. It'll put it inside the circle or outside the circle. In this case, I want it inside. I'm going to hit O so I can see what I'm doing here. And I don't know what's going on. It looks like for some reason my mask effects are not on there. So we'll put it back on. And again, we're just kind of doing a smaller version of the first one. And I'm going to try and bring the color down. I think that's part of the reason this is feeling just really extreme. We'll make it less colored and more just adding light. Okay, I think that's probably all I can get away with. To be honest, anything more is going to feel like it wasn't naturally there at all. It might already feel like that. Let's just fit this to screen. Okay. And then I'm going to darken down the background. So I'm going to use my curves deepen. Cool, that looks pretty good. And then the subject, we can make the subject pop a little bit. Go clothing pop, and that'll hopefully make this bag pop nicely. Ah, it looks like it didn't select the bag. How sad. Okay, so in this case, we'll just grab a brush. Go in here to our presence, texture, clarity, dehaze. And now that bag is popping. Okay, and we can do the same thing with this particular stump. again, just 1 point, hold shift, hold shift. You can see how much better that works than when I try and manually brush it. I just don't have the most steady hands, I guess. Highlights up, whites up. Need to add some color back in here. A little bit of clarity. Somewhere around there. Cool. Got a nice leading line. It's brightened up. The bag is the focus of the show. This one is very similar, so I could probably honestly just copy the settings in this photo. So we'll go copy, select all, select those masks, except for these last two, which were for the bag and for the clothing. Lightroom's going to think, and what's so cool about AI masks is Lightroom is also going to guess where those masks are supposed to be. I'm going to do one more mask here because I feel like the rest of the image really bright, but actually the center where I want people to look isn't as bright as the rest. So we're going to take the exposure down a little bit, or the more transparent way to do that, bring the shadows and the blacks down a little bit. It'll feel more natural, and then just brighten everything else up. So here's what that mask is doing. There's before, there's after. The key is you want to keep it subtle, like 100 small little micro adjustments rather than one big effect in one spot is going to feel much, much better. I'm going to do the same thing with this stump. You can see as I'm no longer trying to explain things as much, I can go a little bit faster, hopefully. Okay, and then we're going to make our background nice and soft. Where are we? Doot, 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 doot. We could do the Brooding Dehaze Darken. I like this one. So that's pretty good, although it looks like grab some of our subject here in the center. So we can go in here, go subtract, and just go brush. And then I'm going to brush on the part of the image I don't want that effect applied to. And I'm not going to worry too much about being super accurate here because I'm going to lay off this effect so it's not super strong. So let's set this to fit. And grab the amount. Take it down to maybe like there. Pull my contrast on the entire image back because it's pretty heavy. And just have it play. Okay, so this looks all right, except for the top of the image is still really bright. So I am going to hit M on my keyboard, and that'll just give me one of these babies. A nice gradiated filter. Graduated. What school did it go to if it graduated? Okay, I'm going to bring the shadows down, and that looks better. Here's before, here's after. All right, moving on, moving on, moving on. So this one is one of the few tight shots that I've got. So I'm going to play around. I'm going to do two different things. One is going to be obviously just darkening down that background. Try curves 1. It's pretty intense, but I think it's actually not too bad for this particular shot. Okay, that's not bad. Dial back the contrast maybe a little bit. And then I'm also going to just try and blend the hair a little bit. Just to add some contrast, lower the shadows a bit. Okay, that works for me. One other thing I can do with this particular one, because it was taken with a great camera with lots of room to crop in, I'm going to actually create a crop version. So I just hit Command apostrophe on my keyboard. Now I can crop in and we'll get a nice kind of tight shot right there. I think that looks great. And the ground here is kind of drawing my attention because there's just too much texture. So I am going to go with a brush in like that, go to the presence and bring the clarity down, dehaze down a little bit, maybe even the texture down a bit. Cool. All right, we rolling. So you already saw that edit. This one's gonna be very similar. Bam, bam. Gonna go down here, darken my background down, and smooth out the background, dial in exactly how much I want. And of course, if you don't have these presets, you can buy them and have the whole pack, or you can pause the video and try and take a look. I'll show you what's going on in the Vintage Bloom. This is one of my favorites. Just taking the texture, the clarity, and the dehaze down, a little bit happening here in the exposure, and just different variations of this. So I've gone ahead and created a whole bunch of different presets that just really speed things up, especially when I'm dealing with portraits or doing weddings or whatever. If you've got any event, these presets are going to save you a ton of time. I'd highly recommend making your own or grabbing these ones. Okay, one other thing with this photo back here, I do feel like we could bring the saturation up in this little zone here where we've got this nice light coming through the trees. So I am going to do a really rough brush like that. Go to my color section, bring the oranges up ever so slightly. And that's looking like just standing out too much. So I am going to give up on that method. Let's try going down to our HSL and just bring the saturation of our oranges up a bit, maybe even our yellows. I like that. It's no longer super dark and moody, but for the purpose of this shoot, I think that's pretty cool. This one, same thing. Add the preset, bring up the warmth. And that honestly looks really, really dope, just like that. Of course, it's feeling a little bit too black in the shadows. So a couple things I could do. One, raise the exposure, but the bummer of that is then you kind of lose the vibe. The other thing that I could try would be just to, let's actually hit Shift M. Here's an interesting trick, okay? Grab a radial filter, just make it off screen and invert it. So I've made a tiny little circle here. I'll hit the apostrophe key. And now because everything outside the circle is selected, I've selected the entire photo, okay? That's step one. Step two is we're going to go subtract, and we're going to go with subtract luminance range. And so we're going to select all of the highlights and the whites so that we're only selecting the dark parts of the image. And then if we play around with these little sliders here, you can actually kind of blend it a little bit more. Okay, so we've selected just the blacks and the shadows in the image. Now I can take these shadows up, take the blacks up, and you're gonna see we can raise just those parts of the image without affecting our highlights as much. So we've made it brighter without really losing that kind of deep, rich contrast, which allows us to then, if you want to, add a little contrast still, and then bring the exposure up. So here's where we went from there to there. I think that's pretty cool. Nice little product shot here, nothing super fancy. Add our preset, Shift M to make a nice radial filter, contrast down, highlights down, or highlights up, whites up. And you can see that's too far because the rest of the image is clearly too dark. But if we do this in two stages, one like that, and then we can just duplicate it and make a smaller one that we put here. Although this area is already kind of brighter, so we probably don't even need to worry about that. Something like that looks pretty good. Again, we can bring the shadows up, bring the contrast down because it's just a little too much. And then because I want a little more saturation in the yellows, we can either lower the exposure or raise the saturation a bit, or a combination of both. So finding the right color is really all about finding the right blend of the hue, the saturation, and the luminance to get your photos where you want. So go with forest greens, deepen down the background. Okay, that's a little bit far, but once we bring our exposure up, not too shabby, I'm gonna warm it up. Somewhere around there, I think is pretty cool. Raise those shadows. And I do think that's still too far in, too far in the background. Somewhere around there, pretty easy, pretty simple. And of course, if you want to, you can make the background as dark as you want, or you can just grab our AI bloom. You can see what's happened to these trees. Just find the right amount of blur and say somewhere around there. One thing I want to bring out is this stump I'm standing on. I feel like that has some cool texture, some cool detail, and that's being lost a little since I made those adjustments. So we'll bring our texture up, our clarity up. Bam! Bam, bam, bam. So at this point, I hope you're kind of seeing the pattern here. It all comes down to just getting your colors right in the first place. You create a nice preset for that shoot, and then you can just apply that across the board. And then using AI presets to really enhance your workflow. Like, that's the main takeaway here, is that, yeah, this is how you do a dark, moody edit, but I think what's more important than just the understanding of that is understanding how you apply that to a workflow. When you're actually trying to edit hundreds of photos, you're trying to do this professionally, you're trying to work with brands, get cool stuff, whatever it is for you, it really comes down to finding a system that makes it manageable. And so you're not going to be able to spend 30 minutes per photo. So using AI presets and presets for your colors is really going to speed things up. So we've got our forest green preset. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to deepen down that background. Okay, somewhere around there. bring our contrast down because that's just a little bit much. And swing. Just blend the hair there. Okay. Bring a little texture in on that stump by hitting K on my keyboard. And you can see there's nothing super fancy about what I'm doing. I'm just sort of highlighting certain things that I think are interesting in the photo by enhancing the clarity and the texture on those. And then I'm taking away things that aren't the main focus of the photo by bringing down the clarity, bringing down the texture, making them a little bit darker. So that is kind of all there is to it, to be honest. All right, there we go. That looks pretty cool. So if this video has been helpful, do me a big favor, hit the thumbs up button. If you want to grab a free preset, I'll leave that link, as well as a link to the AI Engine Toolkit and Clean and Classic, the entire schmozzle. This is actually Clean and Classic version 2, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, buy a Shimono bag. If you're looking for a camera bag, honestly, these things are unreal. If you have questions about the bag, let me know. I'll give you like 2 more seconds of like me telling you what's in this bag just to save you some time. 1, it's got like 2 amazing water bottle pouches that fold out here. Really cool. 2, it's got some lens filter pouches that screw into one side. 3, it's got a side access pocket to grab your camera bag from the side if you want. 4, it's got these cool straps, and these straps have a really awesome webbing. So you can put your tent poles in here, you can put skis in here. This is like an adventurer's camera bag. It's really cool. 4 or 5, I don't remember. It's got a roll top at the top, which is really awesome. So it's got a camera bag section, and then it's also got a stuff section. That's probably my favorite part about this bag, because most camera bags, it's like you can either bring a camera bag or a hiking bag, and the hiking bag doesn't fit your camera, and the camera bag doesn't fit your hiking stuff. So this, I can actually fit like 2 sweaters and a sandwich, which is an amazing amount of room because it has an expanding roll top. What else? It's got mesh pockets, got all sorts of dividers. You have a question, you let me know, because I will brag about this bag because of how awesome it is, and look how sick it looks. So yeah, that's it. If this was helpful, hit that thumbs up button, grab a link to all sorts of good stuff in the bottom, and I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, create something awesome. Peace.